What a historic day. After adopting the eighth principle about less than an hour ago, let's take a deep breath and feel the presence of this community gathered in this space. On Tuesday starts the Gaelic festival of Imbolc. Christians might call it St. Bridget's Day. And then Wednesday, we in the US might celebrate Groundhog Day. This time of year for us in the North marks the midpoint between the winter solstice and the spring equinox. Imbolc means in the belly. It's a time when a ewe's milk starts to flow. We might start to see signs of new life. It's a time full of pregnant anticipation and new possibilities. The Celts would, among other things, prepare by cleaning their houses, sweeping away the old cobwebs, and making room for whatever the growing season might provide. It's a seasonal reboot, celebrating survival, taking stock of what no longer serves us, and planning for a new season. Not only is this congregation on the verge of a new season, we are on the threshold of a new future. We are emptying our buildings and moving into new office space, and soon we'll gather in worship in a new temporary sanctuary. Earlier today, we took the bold step of adopting a new eighth principle, recommitting ourselves to the work of anti-racism and anti-oppression. Since I arrived a year and a half ago, this congregation has been taking stock, remembering the rich history of community church, celebrating its victories and its survival. This church, which in 3 years will be 200 years old. This church, which has gathered for worship in 3 different sanctuary buildings of its own, as well as in temporary spaces. Despite a global pandemic, this congregation still worships together every week, has continued programming and added new programming. This congregation has provided leadership and support to countless social justice efforts. Our vote today is a clear signal that our work towards justice and equity will continue. Part of that work is coming to terms with the reality that as limited human beings, we will sometimes fall short despite our best intentions. We, as human beings, never reach that permanent state of goodness. Luckily, that means that there is no permanent state of badness either. A more realistic goal is to work towards becoming better. Mindfulness meditation is one of my spiritual practices. When I first started meditating, I thought the goal was to quiet my mind. I thought that meditation would magically stop the thoughts that constantly flow through my mind. That might still be the goal. I'm no Zen master. But for me, what the practice of meditation has taught me is the practice of a fresh start, a beginning again. When I meditate, I sit and I focus on my breath. After a while, I notice that a thought has led me down the primrose path, and I return my focus to the breath. Then another thought leads me astray, and I return my focus to the breath. This cycle of distraction and return to the focal point happens many times during any meditation session. And with each cycle, I learn how to release any compulsion to scold myself for being tempted by a thought. The brain oozes thoughts. That's what it's designed to do. When I notice I'm following a thought, I just return to my focus without judgment. In each meditation session, I don't practice preventing my thoughts. I practice beginning again in the spirit of love and compassion, with a new intention to keep focused on my breath. Since I'm on the topic of beginning again, and since Groundhog Day is Wednesday, it seems appropriate to weave in the plot line of the movie Groundhog Day. For those of you who haven't seen the movie, it's about a self-centered weatherman named Phil, played by Bill Murray, who arrives in Puxatawny, Pennsylvania with his TV crew to cover the story of whether Puxatawny Phil, the groundhog, sees his shadow or not. It's the fourth year in a row that Phil has been required to cover this story, and he feels this is beneath his talents. On Groundhog Day, he wakes to the strains of I Got You, Babe on the hotel clock radio, has a miserable day, goes to bed, and then the next morning, he wakes up and realizes that it's the same day with the same song, with full memory of what happened in the previous version of the same day. The people he encounters have no idea that the day has already happened. For them, it's a totally new day. This day repeats thousands of times. And on each new day, Phil does something different to see if he'll eventually escape the cycle of repeating the same day over and over, with full memory of what happened on all of the previous versions of that day. Of course, this being a Hollywood movie starring Bill Murray, lots of hilarity and unchurch-like behavior ensues. I won't spoil the ending for you. This plotline, however, is very compelling. Living the same day over and over again with knowledge of what happened on the previous versions of that day. What would I do if I lived the same day over and over? Let's say my goal was to spread as much love as I could within that day. I would wake up, be faced with a series of expected events that I could react to differently each time, creating another series of expected events that I could react to differently. On each new day, fully informed by what happened on previous days, I could tweak my behavior just a little and find out how that different behavior might spread more love than the day before. The people I run into would have no memory of anything I did wrong that caused pain or awkwardness. Each day, I would have the opportunity to start again, to become better without risking harm to people I interact with, since they had no knowledge of my many, many mistakes. With unlimited opportunities for experimentation, I would get really good at spreading love within the environment of that day. Unfortunately, life doesn't work that way. We rarely get do-overs. Each day brings a new set of events, new challenges, new weather, some relatively predictable daily tasks, and new opportunities for meaning, joy, and connection. I believe people generally respond to each set of events with the intent of doing good. But sometimes, despite our best intentions, things don't go quite the way we wanted them to. Any decision made, any action taken can affect people or environments in unimaginable ways. We as humans have limited perception. There's no way we can know how our actions affect the interdependent web we are part of. We as humans have our own unique experiences, live within different cultures and environments, and have our own unique mental and emotional lives. We can't always know in advance how what we say or what we do might affect another person. People also act out of places of pain, fear, or shame, often unconsciously, and cause harm. That doesn't make them bad people. They're people who did harm, like the rest of us who have done harmful things. Whenever we act, we risk doing harm. As imperfect beings, we will never become that elusive good person. Does that make us evil people? Nope, just makes us people. In the reading Janice Marie read earlier, the late and beloved Zen Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh reframed behavior as skillful and unskillful, rather than good and evil. I love this. He emphasized that the goal is not to avoid mistakes, for that is impossible. Instead, we learn from our mistakes, and in doing so, become more skillful. When we make mistakes, we express regret. We attempt to repair any damage we may have caused, and we learn. We acknowledge our impact with curiosity and accountability rather than judgment. We begin anew in the spirit of love and compassion, and we resolve to do better in the future. Community church is on the threshold of a new future. It's a future full of pregnant anticipation and new possibilities. Earlier in this service, we, the congregants of Community Church, pledged our hands and hearts to the Church Universal, which makes of all people one beloved community. And less than 2 hours ago, this congregation voted to affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working together to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. Beloved community happens when all people, regardless of race, color, creed, any identity of all backgrounds and identities, we come together in an interdependent relationship of love, mutual respect, and care that seeks to realize justice within the community and in the broader world. That sounds amazing. These are bold and brave commitments to action, y'all. We're talking about actions that can change the world. When the United States of America was formed, white supremacy was woven into its very structure. I'm going to pause here because I've said something that may trigger discomfort for some of you. If so, I invite you to sit with that discomfort for a moment. Be curious about it. It's a feeling. You don't have to do anything about it, just notice it. When I say the US was founded on white supremacy, I am not saying that anyone in this room is a white supremacist. What I am saying is that the documents that were used to create this nation contain words that gave more rights and privileges to male landowners of European descent than other people, based on the idea that white men were superior to all other groups of people. Since the US was formed, this idea that white people are superior to others has been built into its culture. The phrase white supremacy culture does not cast judgment on any particular person. It is a description of the many ways, structural, economic, sociological, political, and emotional, all these ways, the idea of white racial superiority affects all of us in our daily lives. It affects us in ways some of us aren't even aware of. One of the tasks of building beloved community is to start to notice the ways that white racial superiority shows up in our lives, to examine it with curiosity rather than judgment, to decide to act differently the next time it shows up, and begin again. I don't believe that anyone here chose to live in a culture steeped in white racial superiority, but here we are. It's the water in which we swim. Once we know that, however, we can notice a cold current on our foot, some bubbles on our back, and work towards changing our culture. Each moment becomes an opportunity to begin again and act differently. I once had the privilege of attending a workshop led by Robin DiAngelo. She's a white woman about my age and has been a consultant, educator, and facilitator of racial and social justice for over 2 decades. The most memorable thing she said during that workshop was that when she does racial and social justice work, it's not a matter of if she will do harm, but when she will do harm. This statement highlights that part of the work of social justice is the practice of acting, reflecting with curiosity rather than judgment, attempting repair if harm was done, and of beginning again with a spirit of love and compassion, resolve to do differently the next time. Building beloved community is a practice of beginning again in love. So here we are, friends, together in this virtual yet palpable sanctuary of time and electrons. Soon the snowdrops and crocuses will bravely pop out of the soil with the hope that they will find spring. And maybe Puxatawny Phil will come out of his hole to a cloudy day. If he sees a shadow, hope remains that Malvern Mel and Holtzville Hal out on Long Island will predict an early spring. The fact remains that this congregation is poised for a bold and brave new future, a future that hews and shapes the building blocks of beloved community. We will make mistakes along the way. There is no blueprint, but we can learn to do better the next time when we greet our mistakes with grace and curiosity rather than judgment. Our communal spiritual practice is beginning again in love. May it be so.